Okay, we're back from the break. Thank you for tuning in tonight. Again, this show is live. There are two ways to contact the show. The one would be the phone number that will be listed below, 727-8750 if you have any comments, and also on Facebook, which they are local Pahrump, which they are monitoring tonight. Okay, so one of the things I had on the previous slide was infectious disease, and I want to talk about that because that's a disaster that is really preparing, and let's go to the next one. Obviously, you've heard a lot about Ebola, and the Ebola virus is basically one of those unusual illnesses that has really been isolated to the continent of Africa. And this is the largest outbreak. So one of the things that scares me about this virus is the fact that even medical professionals who have been working in missions and working with viruses and working with this condition have been becoming infected and dying from this disease. So this is one of those, whether it's mutated, whether it's changed, nobody really knows. It is a part of the viruses, a family of viruses that are RNA virus, but it is, the world is a place where travel, we have places we can go easier today, world travel. We have, the population has grown. We're over 7 billion. We live in a much more crowded place. So I did see the special on cable the other night, and looking at the conditions in Africa, I certainly can understand how this is such a pandemic in Africa because of the culture, because of the way people behave and the way they just aren't knowledgeable about this. Part of the reason Ebola has such an issue is because of burial practices, because of the bodies, the way they're handled. And this could be part of the reason, but the numbers of cases are really underreported. You know, they say the death toll's at 3,000. The infectious rate is much higher, this is the part that, you know, we're just not really sure where this is going. If it does break out of the continent of Africa, this is basically one of those global pandemic killers of 100-year proportion. This is one of those diseases, and I'm not trying to scare the public, but I am trying to make you aware of what the world is potentially facing. The U.S. is sending 3,000 troops to contain the virus, not to treat the virus, but to contain the virus and to contain the population, because the local security is breaking down. And this is a threat to global security. Because basically, economically, if one virus particle will infect you and the incubation period is up to 3 weeks, if there is an outbreak in the U.S., which has never seen this virus, what will people do? Will people stay inside? Will people not go to work? Will people not shop? Will people not come in contact with someone else? I mean, especially during cold and flu season. I mean, this virus begins like a flu. I mean, you couldn't tell whether you had Ebola or another cold or another influenza. So the initial symptoms of this virus are no different than any other virus. So therefore, I mean, by the time the symptoms developed, how many people would you come in contact with? How many people could you spread that virus to? So this literally, I mean, not everybody dies from influenza. Not everybody dies from a cold. If you're very sick, yes. And this is true with this particular virus. It will be more fatal in the elderly and the young people who are immunocompromised. Those people that have an intact immune system and are very healthy might stand a chance of survival of this virus. So that particular segment of the population will have a lot of difficulty. The healthcare system in the United States will break down. We can barely take care of the people that we take care of today. Look at the waiting rooms of Las Vegas during the wintertime. If you need to get in, you can't get in. Most people sit in the emergency room. What's going to happen in an outbreak like this? So those are things the media is not talking about and people are not talking about. I mean, one outbreak in the United States, and this is a very, very, very dangerous situation. And I think people need to be aware. They need to be paying attention. And this is why disaster preparedness, I mean, you know, it's like a war of the worlds. The smallest infinitesimal virus has the ability to take the world down. We live with nuclear threat, terrorist threat, you know, earthquakes, things, and yet the one that's the most important today is the one we cannot see, and we never know it's there. So this is why this is so important that we pay attention. Let's talk a little bit more about that. Ebola virus, we'll bring up the next slide. In Africa, it is thought to believe that the virus actually lives in the saliva of the fruit bat. And if anybody saw the movie Contagion, which came out a while back ago, that was the method of transmission of this virus, meaning the fruit bat dropped the fruit, the pig ate that particular thing. The virus was on the hands of the gentleman and the cook who shook hands with someone else, and that's exactly how this virus could be spread. Again, on the last show, I had hand cleaner, and I showed you to wash the palms of your hands, not necessarily the backs, because this is where we touch it. So touching your hands to your face, if you were to come in contact, especially during cold and flu season, this basically, they talked about it in the movie, they called it fomites. This action is how we spread a lot of the viruses to our particular body. So going back, the virus has a high mortality rate, 50 to 90%, and again, no vaccine exists. The last line shows that a couple of the drugs like amiodarone and clomiphene citrate, which has been used in fertility, may have the potential to inhibit or prevent the virus from growing inside cells. So, I mean, these are things that are really experimental. They're trying to get a vaccine. I was reading they think they'll have one by November, but you know, that's a pipeline dream. I mean, nobody knows that that's really going to happen, and in the meantime, things could get out of hand very, very fast. How fast do you think water will go off the shelf? How fast do you think food will go off the shelf if there's an outbreak? So a little bit of preparation can mean you're not the one that's getting trampled in Walmart. So think about that going forward. Anyway, now to the next slide, which is basically we want to talk about some of the medical diseases that are important to prepare for, and I'm going to go through each disease in particular, and when we come back from the break, we will talk about steps you might take if you have one of those diseases that might help prepare you for that. So we'll be right back. Pahrump, thank you for tuning in tonight.